Hello, I'm Edward Lehner. I'm a researcher with Captura Fund. This is a series of videos on capital formation in the cryptocurrency ecosphere. As I noted in the last video, cryptocurrency is a multidisciplinary field, and an examination of the history of this space is required to more fully understand how robust this asset class is. Paradoxical to the idea of the asset class's robustness, this sector is filled with utopian expectations, and at times there are outright misrepresentations and even bad actors. So a history and deep understanding of this asset class is required for clear-headed investing and certainly for understanding this space. So in this series, we want to cover how the asset class started from an investment standpoint. In this video, we will cover 2013. That is not to say that there weren't sophisticated investors in this space prior to this time. Yet, 2013 is a seminal year since you see both Silicon Valley and high net worth individuals enter the space. More specifically, since this is not an exhaustive history of investment in the space, I will have a type of methodology as to who and what will be covered. This methodology intertwines with two broad frameworks. First, longevity and consistency, and secondly, coverage in print. First, longevity and consistency. That is, I will cover larger social actors and their companies in this space, and we understand who has staying power. Secondly, related to news coverage in print, specifically media, but especially print media, has a type of peer-vettedness that coheres to both journalistic and business review frameworks. So given this methodology, let's cover three early movers in the digital currency space from 2013. These early movers will be first, Barry Silbert, who at the time was running Second Market, and this was prior to the founding of Digital Currency Group, which occurred in 2013. Secondly, we'll be speaking about the Winklevoss twins and their proposal for the first Bitcoin ETF, and this was prior to the launch of Gemini. And lastly, we'll be discussing Dan Morehead, and although Pantera was founded in 2003, he transitioned the fund to primarily focusing on digital assets. This also occurred in 2013. Firstly, let's cover Barry Silbert, who at the time, roughly 2013, was still running Second Market. If you're unfamiliar with Second Market, it was a company that allowed stockholders to receive liquidity on pre-liquid assets. So for example, think of the time roughly for Facebook holders or Twitter holders or other pre-IPO companies, it provided liquidity. Silbert founded a fund also in 2013 called BIT, which would later be rebranded as the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, or what we know it as today, GBTC. Silbert would make a number of angel investments in other companies, and later would found Digital Currency Group. GBTC was one of the first instruments that allowed investors to garner exposure without holding BTC. This idea of gaining exposure to BTC without holding the underlying is a significant step in the development of instruments in our space. Silbert's work has been heavily covered in print. Additionally, Silbert has appeared in digital media and has done extensive interviews on the founding of Digital Currency Group. Lastly, he's been mentioned in seminal books in the space, including Nathaniel Popper's Digital Gold and Laura Shin's book, The Cryptopians. Secondly, let's cover the Winklevoss twins, who first proposed BTC's first electronically traded fund, or ETF, which dates back to 2013. The Winklevoss initially filed this with the SEC back in 2013, and according to a number of reports, including a CoinDesk article that was from 2017, they had followed up with this proposal in 2014. This ETF proposal was significant because it developed an institutional framework for BTC exposure, which many others would follow. You can learn more about the Winklevoss twins' work in BTC by reading Nathaniel Popper's book Digital Gold or Ben Mesrick's book Bitcoin Billionaires. Lastly, let's cover Dan Morehead, who in 2013 moved Pantera Capital into its current direction, which primarily focuses on digital assets. Pantera launched the first crypto fund in the US when Bitcoin was roughly $65 in 2013. The firm subsequently launched the first blockchain venture fund. You can learn more about Dan Morehead and his work in BTC by reading more in the show notes. So here we are. We've covered 3 ways that early actors were providing all sorts of exposure to BTC, whether it be Barry Silbert in the founding of BIT, which would become GBTC, or the Winklevosses' attempts at developing an ETF, or Dan Morehead's developed fund. These were early times in the Bitcoin space, and these are seminal figures. When I think about analysis, 2013 was an important year for cryptocurrency from an institutional perspective. Yet the space was still very small then, and the investment should be understood as equally small compared to today. There were other players in 2013. Think Metastable and Naval Ravikant, or Polygon Capital, headed by Olaf Carlson Wee. Yet our coverage of Silbert, the Winklevoss twins, and Dan Morehead still stands because it provides a type of overview for the space at this early stage. Please join me in our next video, The Beginnings of the Asset Class, where we'll be covering from 2013 to 2015.